Have you ever wondered why you're the only human species left on Earth? Not the only kind of person, the only kind of human. For most of our planet's history, that was never true. At least 8, maybe 9 different human species once shared the same skies, hunted the same forests, and warmed themselves by the same fires. Homo erectus, Homo naledi, Homo floresiensis, standing barely a meter tall, tucked away on a remote island. The Denisovans, known to us only through a finger bone and a few teeth. And the Neanderthals, heavy-browed and powerfully built, who survived ice ages that would have killed most of us in a single night. And then, one by one, they vanished. Today, there is only us, Homo sapiens, alone on a planet that used to be crowded with cousins. So what happened to them? For a long time, the answer seemed obvious. We happened. Smarter, faster, more adaptable, we supposedly outcompeted our slower relatives until they simply faded away. It's a tidy story. It's also, as it turns out, almost certainly wrong. Take the Neanderthals, the most famous of our lost relatives. For over a century, they were painted as brutish and slow-witted, barely capable of stringing together a coherent thought. But dig a little deeper, and that picture falls apart. Neanderthals buried their dead. Some graves contain traces of flower pollen, hinting that mourners may have laid flowers over the bodies. They made jewelry from eagle talons. They created cave art in Spain that predates any known work by our own species. They cared for injured members of their group for years, feeding and protecting individuals who could never have survived alone. This was not a lesser species. This was a different one, equally intelligent, arguably more physically powerful, with brains that in some cases were larger than ours. So if they weren't stupid and they weren't weak, why are they gone? The truth is stranger and far more human than the old story of the smart species beating the dumb one. Around 40,000 years ago, Neanderthal populations across Europe and Asia begin to shrink. Not everywhere at once, not in a single catastrophic collapse, but slowly, unevenly, over thousands of years. Some populations hang on in the mountains of Iberia. Others disappear from the fossil record centuries earlier elsewhere. It looks less like a war and more like a long, quiet fade. One theory points to something almost invisible: disease. When Homo sapiens migrated out of Africa, they carried pathogens their bodies had spent generations adapting to. Neanderthal immune systems, shaped by an entirely different evolutionary history, may have had no defenses at all. It wouldn't have taken a battle to wipe out a population. A single, unfamiliar illness, spreading silently through a small, isolated group, could have done it in a single generation, but disease alone doesn't explain everything. There's another number that matters more than any weapon or virus: population size. Genetic evidence suggests Neanderthal groups were small, isolated, and thinly spread, sometimes just a few dozen individuals in a region the size of a country. Compare that to the growing, interconnected networks of Homo sapiens, who were forming larger social groups, trading tools and ideas across vast distances, building alliances between strangers. When your population is small, every hardship hits harder: a bad winter, a failed hunt, a handful of deaths. For a species already living on the edge, it doesn't take extinction-level violence to disappear. It just takes bad luck, repeated often enough for long enough. And here is where the story takes its strangest turn, because Neanderthals didn't simply vanish. In a very real sense, they're still here. When scientists sequenced the Neanderthal genome and compared it to modern humans, they found something nobody expected. Most people with ancestry outside Africa carry Neanderthal DNA. Not a lot, usually 1 to 2%, but it's there, quietly embedded in your own genetic code right now. Genes that may influence your skin, your hair, even how your immune system responds to certain diseases. Some research even links Neanderthal DNA to how people process pain, or how likely they are to be night owls, which raises an uncomfortable, fascinating question. If we interbred with them closely enough to have children who survived and reproduced, were Neanderthals really so different from us at all? Maybe extinction isn't quite the right word. Maybe what actually happened was something closer to absorption. A population so small, so thinly spread, that over generations, it simply dissolved into the much larger population of Homo sapiens around it. Not conquered, not annihilated, diluted, generation after generation, until there were no more Neanderthals left to call Neanderthal. Only descendants, who happen to also be us. But Neanderthals are just one piece of a much bigger mystery. Consider the Denisovans, a human species we didn't even know existed until 2010, identified from a single finger bone found in a Siberian cave. We still don't know what they look like. We have almost no skeletons, and yet their DNA shows up today in the genomes of people across Asia and the Pacific Islands, in some populations reaching over 4%, an entire species walking the Earth for hundreds of thousands of years, and we know it mostly through the genetic echoes it left inside us. Then, there's Homo floresiensis, nicknamed the Hobbit, who lived on the Indonesian island of Flores, until perhaps as recently as 50,000 years ago, around the same time modern humans were expanding through the region. A coincidence? Possibly. But it's hard not to notice the pattern. Wherever Homo sapiens arrives, other human species seem to disappear soon after. That pattern is the part that should really stop you in your tracks, because it suggests that our species' arrival, wherever it went, whatever direct or indirect role we played, reshaped the world in a way no other single species ever had before. We may not have hunted our cousins to death, we may not have committed some grand act of prehistoric violence, but our presence alone, our numbers, our networks, our sheer relentless spread across every continent may have quietly closed the door on every other kind of human that came before. Which brings us back to that first question. Why are you the only one? Maybe the answer isn't that we were better. Maybe it's that we were luckier, more numerous, more connected, arriving at exactly the right moment in exactly the right numbers to tip a fragile balance. Every other human species existed for hundreds of thousands of years, surviving ice ages, surviving predators, surviving conditions that would break most of us today. And still, one by one, they ran out of time. Somewhere in your own body, in the DNA passed down through hundreds of generations, a fragment of that old world still survives. A Neanderthal gene, a Denisovan trace, a whisper from a species that no longer exists, carried forward inside a species that does. You are not just what's left of humanity. In a very real sense, you are what's left of all of them. If this made you see your own DNA differently, you know what to do. Subscribe and join us next time as we uncover another mystery hiding in plain sight.